I'd like to take a couple minutes as Judge Gookin is getting settled to welcome everyone this morning, and I want to thank our assistants today, Mariah, Sarah, and Andrea, who are helping with timer, video, and escorting. So thank you very much. So we will begin this morning. We are interviewing today to fill the vacancy that will become open in December on the Iowa Court of Appeals when Judge Potterfield retires. So Judge Gookin, I'd like to invite you to begin with your opening comments.
Well, good morning to all of you again. It's a pleasure to see all of you and to be here again. I thank you again for your service. This has been a rather frequent service on your part over the last 10 months. I've been here now. This is my fourth time to talk with you. And it's a great honor to be able to do that, and I appreciate that. Now, in the past, I have emphasized three things when I've talked to you about what I think my strengths are in terms of being on the Iowa Court of Appeals. I've talked about my experience being a lawyer in general practice for 28 years in southeast Iowa, and then serving on the Iowa District Court bench for 8 years now. Also, a rather broad life experience. I have some business experience outside of the practice of law that I was taking on during my practice when I was a part owner in several radio stations, and I did a real estate development and did some business things outside of the practice of law when I was also in a busy general practice. The second thing I've emphasized to you is my work ethic. I fully understand the amount of work that the Iowa Court of Appeals does, the number of rulings that they kick out on a regular basis. I'm not afraid of that work. If you review my application, I think it shows you that I've worked hard throughout my career and would expect and intend to work hard if chosen to serve on the Iowa Court of Appeals. Finally, I've also talked about my report card, that 2018 Iowa State Bar Association Judicial Performance Review that I received a 100% retention rating, which was the only district court judge to receive that, and also some high marks in terms of my abilities as a judge from the people that practice in front of me in the 8th District. I want you to remember all those things. I don't want you to forget about them, but today I'd like to talk about a few other things that I think also make me a good applicant for the Iowa Court of Appeals. And basically what I want to talk about are some non-adjudicatory matters in which I've been involved, committees, commissions, different matters that I think will help me to be a good judge on the Iowa Court of Appeals. And in fact, I don't know that you want to follow along, but on page 11 of my application, paragraph 16, I list many things that I've been involved in that I think are important for you to know and obviously to ask questions about if you have questions. And I'm just going to briefly go through some of those things. Throughout my career as a lawyer as well as a judge, I've been involved on several different committees of the Iowa State Bar Association. Currently, I'm serving on the Civil and Criminal Jury Instruction Committee. For those of you that may not know, that's the committee that tries to synthesize and distill sometimes some very complex legal issues in a manner that's understandable and usable by jurors in this state, most of whom don't have legal training when they're called upon to make these very important decisions. And so the Jury Instruction Committee performs a great function in providing some plain English jury instructions so that the law can be properly described to those jurors and they can use it in their deliberations. And that's been a great experience to be a part of that committee. I've also, or I'm currently serving on the Iowa Judges Association Board of Directors, which I think is a very important group representing the judges in this state. I was elected by the judges of the 8th District to serve in that capacity on their board of directors. I served on the Iowa Supreme Court Limited Jurisdiction Task Force. That was when I was in private practice, dealing with policies relative to judges and to district associate judges. I've served on the Iowa Supreme Court Commission on Continuing Legal Education, 2 full terms, dealing with our continuing legal education requirements and the regulations concerning that, and was chairman of the CLE Commission. I worked on the Iowa Judicial Workload Formula Study Committee. Sounds kind of dry. It kind of is. There's a lot of statistics involved with that, but it helps us get a handle on what our resources are to do our work and to best allocate those resources so we can do the best job possible. I've also served on the Iowa Supreme Court Guardianship and Conservatorship Reform Task Force. That's a committee that's just finished its work in the last year or so, and we are now gearing up for a January 1, 2020 implementation of two pieces of legislation that significantly change the guardianship and conservatorship laws in Iowa. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I was a presenter at a CLE presentation about those changes. And I'm going to be doing some further presentation on that as a part of our Bench Bar Conference CLE event in the 8th District. I also am on the Iowa Supreme Court Client Security Commission. I'm currently the chairman of that commission. That's the commission that deals with the collection of interest on lawyer trust accounts that's used in those unfortunate situations where a lawyer may have taken advantage of their fiduciary situation with the client, taken money they weren't supposed to take. And although the Client Security Commission and the money that is set aside for the Client Security Commission is a matter of or means of last resort, oftentimes for people that have lost money, we try and make sure that people are compensated and receive money, if at all possible, if they've been defrauded. I've served on the Iowa Supreme Court Rules of Criminal Procedure Advisory Committee. I'm currently co-chairman of that. And as a result of that, I'm also on a current task force of the Iowa Supreme Court Rules of Criminal Procedure Review, where we're basically rewriting the rules of criminal procedure. I've also served on a nominating commission at the magistrate level, just like you served on this nominating commission, and have chaired, and I'm currently chairing 3 counties' magistrate nominating commissions. I'm on the planning committee of the 8th District Bench Bar Conference that's going to be held November 22nd. That's a CLE event. Again, I'll be presenting about guardianship and conservatorship changes at that. I also serve on the board of directors of the 8th Judicial District Department of Correctional Services. We are the board that governs the activities of the Department of Correctional Services in the 8th District, dealing with supervision and community-based corrections, and that's been a very rewarding and interesting service too. So I point these things out to you because I think they are important in terms of my abilities to serve on the Iowa Court of Appeals. You know, none of these things are required of a judge. We're just required to go hear the cases, do the court service days, write our rulings. But I think it's very important that we stay involved and we do these non-adjudicatory matters. For me personally, I can tell you that I think it makes me a better judge, a better legal professional to be involved in these types of things. Most of us don't seek them out. They kind of find us, and we don't say no, and so we work in these capacities to not only help ourselves understand the law better and to be better experienced, but to also make the Iowa judicial branch better. I think when we're involved and when we're doing these kinds of things, besides our regular job of being on the bench and issuing rulings, we are making the Iowa judicial branch the best that it can be. And I can guarantee you that if chosen to serve on the Iowa Court of Appeals, I want to continue to do those things to the extent that the job will let me do that, because I think it's so important in terms of the quality of our judicial system and the service that lawyers can give to their clients in the state of Iowa. So again, we've talked a lot in the past. I'm not going to take any more of your time in terms of an opening statement, but wanted to bring those things to your attention. And I respectfully request that you consider my candidacy and nominate me to the governor for this position on the Iowa Court of Appeals. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have some questions from the commission. We'll begin with Dan Hoytick this morning. Dan, do you have a question?
Judge, would you Do you believe you have a specific specialty or an area of a subject matter that you feel like you are very strong in, and that you would be a go-to for local judges, other judges in your district, as the judge that they would call if they had a question on a criminal matter or a family law matter or a juvenile matter? If you were to pick a handful of things, what do you think are the things you're real strong in?
I was in general practice, so I did a little bit of everything. And as I think told you before, serving on the district court bench is kind of like being a general practitioner in terms of a judge, because we hear everything. I would say that probably where I have had the most experience, if I combine both my practice experience and my judicial experience, would probably be, if I had to choose two areas, would be family law and criminal law. Those are areas that I was involved in a lot in the practice of law, particularly family law. And since becoming a judge, I've also, a lot of what we do is criminal law and family law. It's not that you don't hear other things. Boundary disputes, I think I've mentioned before, that's something that surprised me when I became a judge, how much you deal with boundary disputes. But it is Iowa, and we really care about our real estate and where those boundaries are. But I would say that those are probably the two areas that I've had the most experience in, if you combine my private practice with my judicial experience.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Valentine?
Good morning, Judge.
Good morning.
You read my notes that I was taking last night, so I'm just going to kind of add on to your comments, but I'm curious how your involvement on those various commissions has changed or impacted your view from the bench.
Well, I think just the fact that you're able to see things from so many different angles. I'll take one example. On the Criminal Law Advisory Committee, we redrafted a rule about jury selection. It used to be our rule provided that there was actually a separate examination of potential jurors to choose your alternates. Nobody in the state of Iowa was really doing that. They were just combining it all in one. And so we chose to change the rule, but you realize how difficult it is to write that rule and to make it clear for everybody to use and understand when you start to write it. And I was the one that principally kind of drafted that, and then the full committee was looking at it, and we were tweaking it as we went. But it gives me a real appreciation for the work everybody does before it gets to me as I'm sitting on the bench. And I think having that perspective of seeing the different angles at which things have to be approached make you a better decision maker when you're the one that has to make a decision concerning those matters.
Thank you.
Mr. Berger? Ms. O'Brien?
Good morning, Judge.
Good morning.
In reading your case, Crow versus Simpson, it was a civil case that was tried twice, appealed 3 times, if you count all the levels.
Right.
When you contrast that with the kind of the practical reality of most civil practice these days, do you have any insights about how much time, effort, and money goes into a case that really makes law, like the one that you handled with this personal injury case?
Well, I guess I would say that as far as, and keeping that case in mind, I know it had been tried before I got to it, and then I was the presiding judge at, I think, the second trial, but maybe the third trial. In any event, when people believe that they have been wronged, they need a place to air that grievance. And when they think mistakes have been made as a part of the process, they need to think they can be heard. And that's what the law is all about, is making sure that people are heard, making sure that they go away from their experience with the courts in believing that they've been heard. And so I think in terms of the resources, the money, the effort that goes into pursuing a case like that to many different levels, it's just a part of our process. It obviously factors in when somebody's ready to say, okay, I'll negotiate and we'll get this matter settled without the need for any further judicial intervention. But I think it's very important that the citizens of the state know that they have a place to have their disputes resolved, no matter how many times it may take to go back and do it, that they're always going to get a fair shake. So I think my feeling is that although sometimes you think, wow, how could this go back and forth to the appellate level 2 or 3 times, I think it's because people believe they need to be heard. They believe they need a place where they can seek a legal remedy, and that's our job, is to provide that.
Thank you.
Mr. Sukup.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
If you move from the district court to the appeals court, what would you look most forward to?
Honestly, I really like research and writing, and that's what you do on the appellate level. And so I think that's what I look forward to the most. I think the thing I would miss the most is you don't have as much interaction with lawyers and other judges because you're just a lot more focused as a part of those 9 judges on the Iowa Court of Appeals. That's why I'd like to do some non-adjudicatory things also to get me out in the public and to, again, not feel like I'm in an office in front of a computer all of the time. But honestly, I do like research and writing, and I think that's the thing that really attracts me to this, because that's a part of what you've got to do.
Thank you.
Ms. Conover.
You answered my question about what you would miss most from the district court. How would you approach the collaborative process that is inherent to the Court of Appeals rulings?
Right, and that's one of the things I've talked about before is, you know, as a district court judge, I have the luxury of making my own decisions and rulings, and I don't have to talk to anybody else about what my ruling is going to be. I have no problem with that. I feel like I'm a team player. I feel like as a part of the leadership roles that I've held in a lot of these committees and commissions, you have to collaborate. You have to try and reach that center that you feel is the correct answer. And so I've been doing that a long time, and I feel comfortable with that. I don't see any problem with it. I think, as I've stated before, if I feel like something is the subject of a dissent, I'm not going to hesitate to dissent from a ruling of my fellow judges. But I have, I think, an ability to work with other people that would serve me well in that collaborative effort on the Court of Appeals.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Bloom?
So one of the other applicants had brought up a case where there was a reasonable suspicion. It was a suppression of evidence motion. And it got me thinking about big data and how that might impact the law. So in this case, there was some erratic driving that led to a stop. And I was thinking, you know, my car beeps me every time I get close to the lanes, you know. So we're not that far away where probably there'll be data that you could get that would say, well, they were or weren't driving erratically, aside from what a police officer might observe. Or this morning I was in a fender bender, and you know, we did sort of I hadn't been in one in 30 years, so it was quite different. We took snapshots of evidence or insurance in that. But the point is, we're probably not far from where they could come back and say, well, you know, Mr. Bloom, you were driving 35 and a 30, and you were only 10 feet behind the person in front of you, and so here's the data. You're committed a violation. Do you see that encroaching in the courtroom today? This kind of data explosion and information, and what are your thoughts on it?
Having tried and been involved in several personal injury accidents when I was in private practice, I mean, we have it now. It's the black box. Every newer car, I can't tell you what year it started, but there's a black box in there. Yeah, I had a case where no one saw it happen because there were fatalities involved, but the black box revealed that one of the vehicles was traveling 90 miles an hour and the brakes had not been applied before the impact. So that black box gave us a pretty good idea of what happened. I don't see it as a problem. It certainly it can end up having some interesting evidence issues sometimes. I'll tell you what, we're seeing more than black boxes are emails and text messages. We now get, I may get 200 pages of emails and text messages in a domestic family dispute kind of situation. It's a different way of doing business in the courts, but again, we adapt to it, we adjust to it, and we try and find the truth.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. Great questions. I'm sorry that we have run out of time for questions today, but we want to thank you for being here, and we wish you well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, everyone. Thank you for your service. Have a good day.